Have you ever wondered how far the human mind can go in inflicting pain? What you're about to hear is not for the faint of heart. The methods you're about to discover will shock you to your core. Some of these techniques are so evil, they'll make you question humanity itself. Stick around, because the last one is so disturbing, it will leave you sleepless. From ancient civilizations to modern-day regimes, torture has been used to control, punish, and terrify. But the methods devised over centuries are far more terrifying than you could ever imagine. Stay tuned as we reveal the 15 most evil torture techniques ever used in human history. Hi guys, welcome to our channel, where we uncover the dark, disturbing, and often hidden sides of history. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode that uncovers the shocking truths behind mankind's most sinister secrets. And if you're ready to explore the deepest depths of human cruelty, hit that like button and buckle up. Let's dive in. Torture has been used for millennia as a weapon of power. Ancient rulers, religious leaders, and dictators alike have employed unthinkable methods to control their enemies, extract confessions, and inflict the maximum amount of suffering. What makes these techniques so terrifying isn't just the physical pain. They were designed to destroy the mind, soul, and dignity of their victims. But where did these techniques come from? Many were devised during times of political or religious upheaval, where fear ruled and suffering was the ultimate weapon. Some were meant to draw confessions, others to send a message, but all of them were rooted in sheer, calculated evil. Let's now delve into the top 15 most evil torture techniques mankind has ever used. 1. The brazen bull. Imagine being locked inside a hollow bronze bull as a fire is ignited beneath it. The ancient Greeks designed this monstrous device not just to torture, but to turn the act into a sick spectacle. As the fire grew, the metal bull would heat up, roasting the victim alive from the outside in. But the horror didn't stop there. Ingeniously, the bull was constructed so the victim's screams would echo through tubes, making it sound like the bull itself was roaring. A slow, excruciating death, and a horrific piece of theater for the onlookers. It's hard to fathom how any human could devise such a cruel and elaborate instrument of suffering. 2. Scaphism, the boats. Perhaps one of the most grotesque forms of execution in history, scaphism, or the boats, was devised by the ancient Persians. The victim was stripped naked, placed between two hollowed-out boats, and force-fed a mixture of milk and honey until they could no longer control their bowels. Then they were left floating in a stagnant pond or marsh, exposed to the elements. Soon, insects would swarm, attracted by the filth and sweetness, and begin to eat away at the victim's flesh. The victim, immobilized, would be left to rot alive, slowly consumed by insects while suffering from infection and dehydration. Some reportedly lasted for days or even weeks, a horrifying testament to human cruelty. 3. Rat torture. This method makes use of one of humanity's oldest fears, rats. Used in medieval Europe and even during some more recent conflicts, the victim would be restrained, and a cage or pot filled with rats would be placed on their stomach or chest. Then heat would be applied to the container, driving the rats into a frenzy. With nowhere to go, the terrified rodents would burrow through the victim's flesh, desperately trying to escape the heat. Imagine the sheer terror of feeling the rats gnaw their way through your body, knowing there's no escape. This technique wasn't just about physical pain, it played on primal fears, turning it into an ultimate form of psychological torment. 4. The Pair of Anguish. The Pair of Anguish was a small, seemingly harmless device that hid within it an insidious mechanism of torment. Inserted into the victim's mouth, rectum, or vagina, the pear-shaped device would be slowly expanded by turning a screw, causing internal tearing and bleeding. Designed to inflict maximum internal pain without immediate death, this tool was often used to humiliate as well as torture. Its grotesque nature lies in the fact that it was often employed for religious or moral offenses, like blasphemy or adultery, turning punishment into both a physical and psychological violation. The slow, deliberate nature of its use ensured the victim was left in agony long after the torture ended. 5. The Iron Maiden. One of the most notorious torture devices in history, the Iron Maiden resembled a standing sarcophagus with spikes lining the inside of its door. When the victim was placed inside, the door would close, driving the spikes into their body, not deep enough to kill immediately, but just enough to pierce the skin and organs. As the victim struggled, the spikes would dig in further, prolonging their suffering. The design of the Iron Maiden wasn't just about pain. It was about psychological horror, being trapped, slowly dying, knowing that every movement caused further agony. The spikes were positioned to miss vital organs, ensuring the victim could linger in torment for hours, possibly even days. 6. Saw torture. This nightmarish method saw victims hung upside down to maximize blood flow to the brain, ensuring they stayed conscious throughout the torture. The torturers would then take a saw and start cutting through the victim's body, beginning at the groin and working their way downward. The victim, suspended by their feet, would endure this excruciating process, remaining aware as the saw slowly made its way through their flesh, bone, and organs. What made this method particularly horrific was the slow pace at which it was carried out, sometimes lasting hours. It wasn't just about ending life, it was about drawing out the pain for as long as possible. 7. The rack. The rack is synonymous with medieval torture, and for good reason. Victims were laid on a wooden frame, their hands and feet bound to rollers at either end. Slowly, the torturers would turn the rollers, stretching the victim's body to the point of dislocation. Ligaments, muscles, and tendons would snap, bones would crack, and the sheer agony would drive most victims to the brink of madness. The rack wasn't just a device for punishment. It was often used to extract confessions or information. But even after the victim had said everything they could, the torture wouldn't stop, leaving them permanently maimed or dead from shock. 8. Bamboo torture. Bamboo is one of the fastest growing plants on Earth, and this fact was exploited in one of the most excruciating forms of torture ever conceived. The victim would be tied down over a bed of young bamboo shoots and left there as the bamboo slowly grew. Within a day, the shoots would begin piercing the skin, burrowing deeper and deeper into the body. The bamboo would continue to grow, inch by inch, impaling the victim alive. The slow, relentless nature of this method, combined with the sharp, unyielding force of the bamboo, made it a particularly terrifying and drawn-out death sentence. 9. The Catherine Wheel. Named after Saint Catherine, who was said to have been martyred on such a device, the Catherine Wheel was designed to prolong suffering as much as possible. Victims were tied to a large wheel and their limbs were systematically shattered with an iron bar. But instead of a swift death, they were left in this broken state, often displayed for public viewing, as they slowly died from shock, blood loss, or exposure. The broken limbs would twist unnaturally, sometimes piercing through the skin, leaving the victim to endure unbearable pain for hours or even days. It was as much a tool for execution as it was for instilling terror in anyone who dared defy authority. 10. Flaying alive. One of the most barbaric and slowest forms of torture, flaying involved stripping the skin from a person's body, usually starting at the face. This was often done with the victim fully conscious, as the torturer carefully peeled back layer after layer of skin. The pain was excruciating, and death could take hours or even days as the victim slowly bled out or succumbed to infection. In some cases, victims were kept alive as long as possible to prolong their suffering. Flaying was often used to send a message, its sheer brutality serving as a gruesome warning to others. 11. The Judas Cradle. A horrifying device used during the Spanish Inquisition, the Judas Cradle was designed to humiliate and inflict excruciating pain. The victim was suspended above a pyramid-shaped seat, with the sharp point inserted into their anus or vagina. Slowly, the victim was lowered onto the cradle, the sharp point driving deeper with the weight of their own body. Over time, the pain became unbearable as internal organs were torn and infection set in. The slow, degrading nature of this torture made it one of the most psychologically and physically damaging methods ever devised. 12. The Blood Eagle. A Viking execution method that was as symbolic as it was brutal. The blood eagle involved cutting open the victim's back, severing the ribs from the spine, and pulling the lungs out through the wound to resemble wings. This gruesome spectacle was meant to honor Odin, the god of war and death, but it was a horrifyingly slow and painful way to die. The victim remained conscious for most of the process, enduring unimaginable pain as they bled out. The blood eagle was not just an execution. It was a ritualistic display of power and cruelty that sent a chilling message to enemies. 13. Waterboarding. While waterboarding leaves no physical scars, it is one of the most psychologically devastating forms of torture. The victim is strapped to a board with their face covered by cloth, Water is then poured over the cloth, simulating the sensation of drowning. Every breath becomes a desperate struggle as water fills the victim's nose and mouth. The terror is so overwhelming that many victims would confess to anything just to make it stop. Though widely condemned as a form of torture, waterboarding has been used in modern times, particularly during interrogations in the War on Terror, making it both controversial and devastatingly effective. 14. The thumbscrew. A small, simple device that caused immense pain. The thumbscrew was used to crush the victim's thumbs or fingers, often until the bones were completely pulverized. This method was frequently employed during interrogations to extract confessions, but the damage it caused was permanent, leaving the victim maimed for life. The slow, methodical tightening of the screws added a psychological element to the torture, as the victim could see and feel their bones being crushed, but was powerless to stop it. The simplicity of the device, combined with its devastating effect, made it a favorite tool of medieval inquisitors. 15. The breaking wheel, also known as the wheel of torture. This device was used to prolong the suffering of its victims. The victim was tied to a large wooden wheel, and their limbs were systematically broken with a heavy iron bar. The shattered bones often pierced through the skin, leaving the victim writhing in agony. But instead of a swift death, the victim was left on the wheel to die slowly, often in full view of the public. The wheel was sometimes hoisted up for display, making the victim a gruesome spectacle of pain and suffering. The broken body would be contorted into unnatural positions, and many victims would die over the course of several days due to blood loss, infection, or exposure. This method was not just about killing. It was about making the process as agonizing and prolonged as possible, turning the victim's death into a horrifying lesson for all who witnessed it. And there you have it, the 15 most evil torture techniques ever used by mankind. It's chilling to think that these devices were designed by human hands, with the sole purpose of causing the maximum amount of pain and suffering. If you found this video both shocking and informative, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you won't miss any of our future deep dives into the dark corners of history. And let us know in the comments, which torture technique do you think is the most horrifying? Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.